Have you ever wondered how a complex idea like the rapture is actually built from different parts of the Bible? It's often talked about as this single big event, but according to one very popular interpretation, it's really more like a puzzle. Today, we're going to connect those puzzle pieces, following the trail of verses to see exactly how this specific picture of the future gets put together. So we're asking two pretty straightforward questions. What is the rapture exactly? And when does it happen? To figure that out, we're going to approach this like a detective story. The clues are scattered across a few key chapters, and our job is to see how this one interpretation fits them all together into a coherent timeline. Now, what's really wild is that the argument we're following is built almost entirely from just two of the Apostle Paul's letters. It's not all laid out in one neat chapter. The whole idea is to link specific verses from here and there, creating this logical chain. So let's follow that chain step by step and see where it takes us. Okay, so where do we even begin? Well, our investigation starts with the absolute foundation of the whole idea. It's found right in the first chapter of Thessalonians, and it's all about a fundamental promise of deliverance. And here's our very first clue. This verse right here establishes the core concept. Jesus rescues believers from some kind of future period called the wrath. This idea of being delivered from something, that's the crucial starting point for this whole argument. So let's keep that phrase, the wrath to come, in our back pocket. It's going to be important. Now for clue number 2, from the very next chapter. See how this links the coming of the Lord directly with the joy of believers being right there, physically present with Him? So this coming isn't just some abstract thing happening in the sky. It involves an actual gathering of His followers. And the third clue adds this really interesting wrinkle. When Jesus comes, He's described as coming with His saints, which kind of makes you ask a question, right? If He's showing up with them, where do they come from? How did they get up there to join Him in the first place? So let's pause and put those first 3 clues together. A picture starts to form. We've got a future wrath. We have Jesus delivering believers from that wrath, and His coming involves believers being with Him. This creates a logical puzzle. For Jesus to come back with His saints, it seems He must have first come for them. See? It suggests a 2-stage event. Okay, so if He comes for them first, what does that actually look like? What's the plan? This brings us to the specific mechanics of the event itself, the how of it all. And this is where we finally get the word rapture. It actually comes from the Latin translation of the Greek phrase for caught up, which is found in the very next passage we're looking at. And according to this view, we're not talking about a symbolic event. This is a literal physical removal of believers from the earth. The passage itself lays out a super specific sequence of events. First, the Lord descends with a shout. Second, believers who have already died are resurrected. And third, those who are still alive are caught up right along with them. And where do they go? They all meet the Lord in the air. This, the argument goes, is the mechanism for that gathering we were just talking about. Okay, so we've got the promise of deliverance, and we have the catching up as the way it happens. But how do we know for sure that this event is the escape from that wrath we mentioned way back at the beginning? Well, the argument connects those two ideas directly. This verse from chapter 5, it's pretty much presented as the smoking gun for this argument. It's a really explicit statement. Believers are not destined for wrath. So the logic is, if believers are not appointed to wrath, then the rapture must happen before that wrath begins. It's their ticket out. And the text draws a really sharp contrast here. It's like 2 completely different paths. For the unsaved, this day of the Lord, that period of wrath is described as bringing sudden destruction. It says they shall not escape. But for believers, a completely different story. This catching up event is framed as their great escape. So far, the argument is pretty self-contained, right? It's all in 1 Thessalonians. But to really pinpoint the timing, the author brings in one final crucial piece of the puzzle from Paul's second letter to the Thessalonians. And believe me, this is where it gets really interesting. So the whole thing hinges on timing. The text gives us a really clear prerequisite, a specific condition that has to be met before that day of the Lord and all its wrath can kick off. So what is that condition? What's the final domino that has to fall? Okay, so this passage drops 2 major players onto the board. A man of sin, sometimes called the lawless one, and this mysterious figure called he who now restrains. The logic presented is simple. The day of the Lord can't start until this man of sin is revealed, and the man of sin can't be revealed until the restrainer is taken out of the way. So the removal of this restrainer is the event that triggers everything else. All right, we've done it. All the pieces are on the board. We've got the promise, the mechanism, the escape, and the final trigger. Now it's time to assemble the puzzle and see the complete timeline that this interpretation creates. And here it is, the full chain of logic. The wrath to come is identified as the tribulation period. Believers are promised an escape from that wrath. The rapture is the vehicle for that escape. Now, the tribulation can't begin until the man of sin is revealed, but that can only happen after the restrainer is taken away. And this leads to the final, crucial link in the chain. This interpretation identifies the restrainer as the church itself. Therefore, if the church has to be removed before the tribulation starts, the only possible conclusion is a pre-tribulation rapture. So, by connecting all these specific verses, a very precise timeline of future events is constructed. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. If this theological argument is viewed as a literal map of what's to come, how might that change the way a person sees the world we're living in today?